when I go to do loads of careers fairs at schools, you look at kind of who turns up, and it's like the police, sometimes like the army might be there. Then you'll see like banks. You'll see like a really weird mix of like employers. And I don't think it gives a really kind of like real view of like what the working world looks like. I think they get a bad deal. I think they get, young people get constantly spoken about in the media about, Gen Z bashing basically. I've also seen a lot of situations where careers advisors are just like, it'll be like a PE teacher who's just been given like an extra role, and a few extra £1,000 a year to do it with no resources and no real guidance.
Today I'm with Sam Conley, who's a youth empowerment at Poplar HARCA. This interview is going to be slightly different from some of our previous ones, where I kind of speak to guests from lived experience and their background and how they got into industry. But today I'm joined with Sam, who kind of works with the youth. So it'd be quite interesting to kind of get Sam's opinions and insight into what the younger generation are actually feeling. Welcome, Sam. How you doing? You good?
I'm really good. Really glad to be here. So thank you for having me on.
That's good. It's finally got there in the end.
Yeah, we did.
So just before we go into it, could you tell us a little bit about your role and what you currently do?
Absolutely. So as you said, I'm the youth empowerment lead at an organization called Poplar HARCA, which is a social housing provider in East London, specifically sort of the Poplar area of East London. I've been here for about a year. So I started in June 2024. And I was really interested to kind of speak on this podcast because of the fact that, I work for a social housing provider. I work directly with, lots of young people who are looking at employment, looking at the next steps of their life. And I think many of the themes and conversations that I have very regularly with young people are very relevant to some of the conversations you've had on this podcast so far. So I'm what's called a youth empowerment lead. So essentially I am in charge of sort of giving opportunities to young people in East London, a focus on self-development, empowerment, and youth voice. So I run programs essentially. So we do kind of youth services. Everything's free that we run. So it's accessible to young people in the borough. And I run programs such as something called the Youth Empowerment Board, which is a group of young people who basically advocate for change and kind of provide their voice in East London to stakeholders, everyone from the housing association to sometimes even the council and, other stakeholders in the borough. And I support them to kind of share their voice and opinions. But I also do other things such as employment services. So I work one-to-one with young people every week who are looking to get jobs and volunteering opportunities. And I also run kind of social action projects for young people where we do kind of volunteering across the borough to support other organizations, which I'm sure I'll go into later on.
Yeah, no, that's cool. It's that's a good rundown of what you do, and I suppose you're quite heavily involved with the younger generation. So hopefully, the stuff that we talk about, you'll be able to kind of give us real insight into how they're thinking, and especially with this series dealing with like working class and low socioeconomic background. So yeah, hopefully we'll gain a lot today. So as I mentioned, this is about working class and those from lower income households. One of the main questions I always ask my guests is, what does working class mean to you, and how would you define it?
Yeah, of course. So I guess in the term of kind of the social kind of class aspect of it, things that come to mind are people who rely, primarily on wages, kind of typically in kind of manual labor, industrial or, service kind of roles, rather than kind of often being business owners, kind of a landowners or kind of having major investments. I think there is, the economic side of it, I think, covers those types of areas. But I also think, including that, there's many aspects of identity. So, shared values, communities, shared experiences. I think there's a lot of, pride in sort of working class culture. So, pride in manual work, pride in having practical skills that you can actually use, day to day in your life. Pride in, having the ability to kind of, graft and kind of, find resources, for your community and family. And I think that it's interesting because, I've often found, I've worked in charities before, social mobility charities, and I often find that, when you ask people, as I'm sure you found, you do get quite a mixture of answers.
Yeah.
And I'm always, reminded of, the fact that, different people have different, I guess, ideas of what it means. Often I think about it in terms of, I guess, kind of socioeconomic status, because, some of the charities that I've worked for in the past, really focused on kind of the socioeconomic aspect of it and, things like social currency, etc. But I think, for me, it kind of encompasses all those things that I just mentioned, in terms of identity and in terms of kind of your space in the economy.
Yeah, no, it's cool. And yeah, just as you said, like through all these interviews, it's such a multi-layered and varied response, and obviously there's always similarities with all my guests because you are dealing with a lot of younger individuals. Do you ever feel like they are aware that there may be some difficulties that they may come across further down the line because of their working class roots or their low socioeconomic background?
Yeah, so I think, on a day-to-day basis, working with a young person who, is, experiencing, I guess, some of the kind of insecurities that unfortunately might come with, being from a lower socioeconomic background. So things like housing, food security, things that come along with that, like family stress and, things that are related to the cost of living crisis. I mean, of course, many young people are kind of acutely aware of what they're experiencing daily.
Yeah.
I think that, in terms of looking at kind of the barriers that they might face to furthering kind of their education or career opportunities, I think that those kind of come up as they happen. So I think that, young people do realize when they go into certain spaces, for job interviews or work experience or that type of thing, higher education is a really common one. They'll see, suddenly they'll sort of meet lots of people who are from different spaces and places
Yeah.
and realize that, oh, my experience, maybe isn't the one that is most catered to here or isn't the one that, is the most valued here. So I definitely have had many conversations with young people around that type of thing. And I think
Yeah.
it's really important to mention those things to young people when you are preparing them for situations, especially for, a young person from, you know, Tower Hamlets, for example, going to like a Russell Group university,
Mm.
I think it's really appropriate to kind of have those conversations around, who you might meet and kind of what those spaces are typically like. I think that young people experience it a lot through social media comparison as well. I think,
Okay. Yeah.
I think a lot of the young people kind of that I have met are kind of judging their futures and their kind of values of what they want to work towards based on kind of what they're seeing online a lot of the time. So I think that
Okay.
there's quite a lot of unpicking there to do in terms of, what's realistic for your current situation. Because
Yeah.
obviously, we've all been victim to it. It's easy to kind of get inspired by, those videos that kind of tell you, how, how you need to lock in and all that kind of culture.
Yeah.
But I think it's, when you're actually going through the complexities of working with young people who are having these challenges, I think it, often, sometimes it is hard to have those conversations because young people, um, may not also have the kind of vocabulary to explain what they're experiencing and kind of
Yeah.
seeing it in terms of the kind of even the phrases that we're using in this conversation so far, may be alien to young people who are kind of experiencing some of those situations.
Yeah. 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 No, and yeah, it's interesting actually how you talked about like because of social media, um, because it's so prevalent in a lot of the younger generation now. Where speaking from experience growing up, like I was kind of at that cusp where social media was being introduced as I was getting older, but a lot of the younger generation now, they kind of just it's completely natural to them. So y- you would think, like, based on them just looking at the stuff that they see on a daily basis, they take it as face value. And yeah, I think sometimes it can be a bit of a hindrance on what the actual reality of it is out there. So yeah, it's good that you you do speak to them, and then you do kind of have those conversations of this is the expectations of what might actually be out there. And would you say there's a lot of like companies kind of doing their part as well to help these younger people?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, I've kind of had some experience working for some great organizations. One to shout out is Creative Mentor Network, who I previously worked for, who are a social mobility charity. I mean, they work all across the UK, and they're specifically there to support kind of young people from working class and low socioeconomic backgrounds into mentorship with quite exciting partners. So they work with companies like, Sony Music. In the past, they've worked with Amazon Prime,
Yeah.
Chanel. Those are some of the bigger names, but there's lots of other amazing companies that provide mentors. So I think there's some. That's one example. I think day to day, I'm constantly getting emails and comms from different organizations that want to get involved with working with young people and supporting young people in some way. So I think, yeah, there is. I think more so at the moment, I'm experiencing, I guess, people coming from the angle of, they want to work with kind of young voices. I don't often really get companies coming with a context of, working with working class young people or young people from low socioeconomic backgrounds. They don't often come with that slant.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, I mean, sadly, I think with what's kind of the move away from, I guess, DEI, that's happened, as a result of, kind of Western politics in the past few years.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot less that I'm seeing conversation around
Okay.
class and, because I try and keep kind of tapped into, articles and kind of, conversations around class. And personally, it seems to me like there's, companies are kind of having less of those conversations and investing less.
Yeah.
So I think there's definitely amazing companies and organizations that are contributing to helping young people. Within the like last week, for example, I had a really good meeting with the Museum of London, who seem to be doing some really interesting stuff about kind of youth volunteering and giving young people a chance to kind of learn skills, which is really exciting. A Canary Wharf group took some of my young people for work experience a couple of weeks ago and gave them some really exciting opportunities, and also gave them expenses for it, which I think was
Oh, that's
that's
good.
really
Yeah.
key. £20 per day expenses, which is great news for the young people who have to go out of pocket to get there. But so yeah, to kind of bring it back to the conversation of class, I think to be candid, I don't really see many organizations approaching or my current kind of organization in that way.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I'm not sure if that's what many organizations are looking at in terms of their kind of onboarding new talent or
Yeah.
looking at diversity. From my personal kind of experience, it seems like that's unfortunately kind of going backwards a little bit. But yeah, I mean that's the thing. That's one kind of angle.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's interesting you say that because it is kind of like one of the last things that you really hear about. Because in the past, it'd always be about gender equality, race, those kind of aspects. But yeah, you don't really hear about class as such a big aspect for companies to really like look into. Like you do hear about like since the Labour government coming in, there's been a big push. Oh yeah, a lot of us have come from working class
Mhm.
background now, managed to work and become MPs. But yeah, in the grand scheme of things, yeah, from what I've seen, it's not as prevalent as some
Yeah.
other kind of
I mean,
initiatives.
there's some really good stuff. I think I mean, yeah. Now you're kind of reminding me. I mean, there was some really interesting conversations. I think at the beginning of their, coming into power about their cabinet and kind of
Yeah,
state school kind of attendance in the cabinet. Was the highest that it had ever been, which was great. But I think that got all derailed kind of now, hasn't it? Sadly, through you know, firstly, kind of what's happened with Angela Rayner, because I think
mm,
she was, one of the key voices there to be proud of
yeah,
working class politicians, and that's sadly gone downhill because of the scandal, and then now it's all been derailed by this narrative of what's happening with reform, and migration. It seems like that's really taken over the conversation now.
yeah,
Um, so it really does go in with what's happening in politics. But I mean, my personal views are that it is the from what I've seen, the key to, what should be kind of addressed when kind of looking at new talent and whatever new talent, because it kind of does connect. It's a thread that connects, a lot of the, if not all of the other kind of areas that they might be kind of wanting to support people and to provide kind of equal access. So it is sometimes baffling, that, it's not on people's radars. And yeah, just want to shout out you, I guess, because I think that's what kind of attracted me to want to talk on this, is that you kind of really provided a really consistent platform to have those conversations. And I think that's really important.
No, thank you. But yeah, no, it's based on my experiences and what I've seen, it does feel like it is an area that does need to be discussed and talked about. Coming back to the discussion of working class, so do you feel like, so it doesn't like lose consciousness in the wider space of just in everyone's thoughts? Do you feel like it needs to be kind of discussed at a much earlier age, like at maybe primary school level?
Yeah, I think that it would be really beneficial to have conversations with young people about, their kind of current situation, kind of, what challenges they may face as they're kind of going through life, and kind of, having trusted adults that they could have these conversations with and provide feedback. But I don't think that's the way that, education is typically set up. I think many people in education would see that as like, limiting young people's aspirations. I think the general sense that I get in education, working closely with education and having worked, within kind of further education previously, is that, it's all about aspirations and building young people's aspirations. And, I've worked in, areas of, high poverty, providing kind of education in those areas. And yeah, it's the narrative, really is helping young people kind of work towards finding opportunities and stepping up to those opportunities. There isn't much of a culture or conversation around, the challenges or, kind of meeting young people where they're at and, acknowledging some of the things that might be happening. So my personal thoughts on that is I think it would be really beneficial to have those reflective conversations with young people. And individuals can do it, but I don't really see much of it in, it's not really in the curriculum. It's not really in even kind of like careers focused curriculum. I don't see much of it. I think UCAS is interesting. For example, like UCAS, I'm looking at the recommendations for advisors this year because I have to help some young people. And they've actually done some interesting stuff around, different guide books for young people who might be experiencing different situations. They had like a separate guidebook for those who were first generation university goers. So I think that's a really great step. I was really pleased to see that. That acknowledges that, young people who are applying to uni and haven't had the privilege of being from a family where, they can get help with their applications from, their parents who have gone to university. Acknowledging that, is a different experience, and like providing further guidelines to that is really positive. Admittedly, I haven't read through it in detail yet because we've just started the UCAS kind of process with our, the young people, because they got until January to apply. But the reason I bring that up is because I think that's an interesting example of, how you can kind of tailor, responses to supporting young people based on kind of what their life experience is and what the resources they have access to.
No, that's actually really positive steps actually, like that UCAS are doing that. I didn't realize they're doing that. So that's actually a really positive step because you always hear about people saying, oh, you must go to university and you must do this and you must take that path, but it's like sometimes it's not so easy for certain individuals, and if they are doing guides where actually this might help you out, that's quite a positive step to take. So you mentioned that you work within Tower Hamlets region. What kind of challenges have you noticed like the younger generation face, and especially because Tower Hamlets is considered quite a poor area?
Yeah, so I mean, I've through my kind of past work, I've kind of worked with young people from Tower Hamlets, but this is the first role that I've had where I'm very hyper local Tower Hamlets focused. So yeah, as I said, I'm just over a year in. So most of the young people are kind of from the immediate area that we are based in,
Yeah.
and kind of residents of the housing association that we work for as well. So um, some of the challenges of Tower Hamlets, I mean, one is it's one of the most densely populated of London's boroughs. So if you're looking in terms of kind of how closely people are, in residency. Lots and lots of tower blocks, lots of flats and apartments all kind of squished in on top of each other. So, young people are living in, accommodation that's, quite cramped often and, lots of urban kind of space, and with, lots of housing and residential and roads. So, they're kind of living in kind of densely populated areas. It's got a very, low kind of age of residents compared to other local authorities. So the median age in Tower Hamlets is 30 years. So
Okay.
basically, it's one of the youngest local authority populations in the UK. So it's actually a really good place to work as
Yeah.
with the youth, because we've got, many young people, and there's lots of services here for young people as well because of that.
Yeah.
So, I don't know the exact stats, so I'm not gonna make one up, but I do know that basically there's a stat around, the percentage of the population that are kind of children,
Yeah.
being fairly high compared to other boroughs.
Oh, okay.
So that's kind of an interesting context. And in terms of child poverty, we've got after housing costs, we've got around kind of 48% of children living in poverty in the borough,
Mm.
um, and 18% of the households are classified as overcrowded.
Oh,
So
right.
you're getting this sort of theme of lots of kind of, unfortunately, kind of overcrowded accommodations, and lots of children living in poverty, unfortunately. So lots of the young people we work with will face those challenges,
Yeah.
from a young age.
Yeah, because like it's quite fascinating because Canary Wharf's classed as Tower Hamlets,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, so it's always that stark reminder of like you've got an area surrounding like Canary Wharf that is quite high poverty,
Yeah.
and then you've got these big financial buildings that kind of shadow the whole area. So it's that reminder of like, yeah, it's that divide of rich and poor.
Yeah. I mean, it's extremely surreal, I think, at times. Like, you got to come down one day and see where we're based. So,
Mm.
for example, when I mentioned I sent those young people to Canary Wharf Group work experience,
Yeah,
when I did the briefing with them, I actually just took them outside and I pointed to the basically, the big building with the pyramid on the top, the
yeah,
kind
yeah,
of
yeah.
iconic one. It's in there on the 30th floor. So
Oh,
I literally
right.
went outside and pointed to it and said, "You're going to be on your work experience is in there on that 30th floor." So it's quite a surreal place to be sometimes, because as you said, you've literally got the massive buildings of Canary Wharf, standing right there with all the bank names on there. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's just it's an odd thing, for it to be, so closely next to each other, but they'd be to be such stark different
Mm.
experiences. And I'm sure there's loads of people that have done videos and you know documentaries and things on that. But it's
Yeah.
the reality for young people that they'll see that there and they may never know what happens in there, or even though they live so close, they may never have a route to even kind of get to that,
Yeah.
work in any of those buildings, even if they wanted to.
As a society, would you say there's more that we could do, like collectively, just to kind of bridge that gap of like the working class and those from low income households?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's obviously the I think it's a responsibility, and it should be something that's often more in terms of looking at kind of how um, employers open opportunity to young people, provide opportunity, and provide access.
Mm.
So that's kind of I guess a bit of a higher level kind of, if you look at kind of especially some of the bigger corporations, structurally, how they offer opportunity. That's one level to it, but I think I like to also look at the kind of personal level, because I think we do all have the ability to, make small changes and kind of do things that can open doors.
Yeah.
So I think today I'll speak about the personal. I think that, people can support young people around them in their life. If you live in somewhere like London, you've constantly got young people everywhere, and they don't have many places to hang out, sadly, and do things, and they don't get much, I think they get a bad deal. I think they get, young people get constantly spoken about in the media about, Gen Z bashing, basically looking at how, how kind of they are in jobs, how, kind of how their attention spans, their, abilities and skills and things like that. But, not many people actually go out and, provide kind of a way for young people to, engage or be looked after. And so I think you can do personal things like, I feel privileged that I can do it for my work.
Yeah.
But I think generally you can, if companies, if smaller companies as well can provide work experience opportunities, provide engagement opportunities and, go out to schools. I think when I go to do loads of careers fairs at schools, you look at kind of who turns up and it's like the police, sometimes like the army might be there. Then you'll see like banks. You'll see like a really weird mix of like employers. I don't think it gives a really kind of like real view of like what the working world looks like. So, I think it'd be interesting for more people to kind of reach out and, put a tiny bit of effort into engaging, young people, especially from state schools, who need those, opportunities to meet people and kind of have social connections for employability. Go out and, or if you're for one, to one or two young people, imagine if everyone, kind of gave a bit of effort like that. I think you'd have a bit more cohesion between kind of young people in, I'll move over to kind of talking about state schooling kind of backgrounds now, because I think those are, in terms of employability, I think, young people don't get much of a good deal often in state schools for kind of careers opportunities.
Well, is that quite a generic thing then in state schools? Are they kind of given a generic, you must do this to get a career path down this way, you have to fill in your CV this way, interview techniques? That is it
Yeah.
quite a generic thing that they tend to get that?
I think it's gotten better. I must say, like, I do go to some careers fairs and meet some careers advisors who I think are really proactive and doing great work. But I've also seen a lot of situations where careers advisors are just like, it'll be like a PE teacher who's just been given like an extra role, and a few extra £1,000 a year to do it with no resources and no real guidance.
Yeah.
And I think it's a big ask, isn't it, to prepare young people for the working world when, I don't even know many adults I could ask who could tell me, what's happening in the working world and what's going to happen next. So I do think, I think work is a big thing, and employability is a massive area that young people, particularly from working class backgrounds, are being kind of let down on, because I think it's a big ask for careers advisors to know every job that's out there.
Yeah.
So I think, more resources should be put into giving young people that and helping them to kind of work towards paths that make sense for them as well.
The main thing at the minute seems to be like AI, and it's moving at such a rapid pace. Do some of these young individuals feel like they're quite fearful or optimistic of this?
So I think I've seen young people use it in some like really ingenious ways. Like, I think that, young people are definitely clued in, from what I've seen, to kind of AI, much more so than kind of my adult colleagues. Young people are already coming to sessions and kind of using, different AI tools to kind of come up with ideas and, create kind of even like things like notes and things for them for school. So I think young people that I've seen, are taking to it, and I think that, they're online so much anyway that it's a natural progression for them to kind of use those tools quite intuitively and naturally. I haven't heard specifically any young people say to me that they're worried about the future because of AI. Generally, there'll be, the conversations we have about anxiety for the future are much more focused on global conflict, much more focused on internal, in this country, politics and, kind of things that are happening in that sense. So yeah, I haven't actually heard young people. I mean, I think that, there's a flip for me personally. So it's a double-edged thing. So I think it's going to be, there's a potential to, give lots of young people the ability to kind of have access to way more information than they may have before, and be able to use that information in a way that can help them to get opportunities and employment, and it kind of levels things out in that sense, because they'll have the ability to kind of ask questions and get responses to some of the things that they might not immediately have access to in their kind of schools or communities.
Yeah.
But I also think that, like many other advancements in technology or other things, it has the massive ability just to kind of be completely monopolized by the kind of 1%, and really make things a lot more difficult for people in terms of job losses. And I think day to day we're seeing more articles coming out about companies that are adopting AI and kind of making in some places quite significant kind of changes in terms of their workforce because of AI. So I think that I am nervous for them as well, because I think that, and I'm nervous for all of us actually. In a sense. I think it's going to affect young people, but it's going to also affect,
Just
potentially
the wider world. Yeah.
every working person. But back to the, bringing it back to the question, personally, I haven't heard any young people yet say that AI is a big concern of theirs, but that might be, due to kind of what they're seeing, the media they're looking at, and kind of the things that they are kind of currently focused on. That may change if, more people, if it becomes more of a thing in the media, and more of a kind of a general kind of anxiety. I think young people will definitely pick up on that and feel that as well.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I think, yeah, like you said, I think it end up affecting everyone, not just younger generation. But yeah, during your answer, you actually touched upon the optimism of like how the world is.
Mhm.
What's the general census of like younger people now, because of the way the world currently feels, and yeah, what's their general outlook on the world?
Yeah. So I think that, I mean, I have daily interactions with, young people that are, constantly inspiring, and, give me, a real sense that, there's lots of young people who are, feeling optimistic and, positive about, their own futures and what they can contribute. I think I mentioned before, I do a lot of like volunteering and social action kind of activities with young people.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, we get so many young people, who apply to do volunteering and to do things such as, collaborations with like food banks and, other kind of community organizations. And, these are young people that already have a lot on their plate. They're going through exams,
Yeah.
and they're choosing to do it in their own time, outside of school hours, which I think is, amazing to see. And I think, I always, I think that's the thing. I think young people, if they're given opportunities, they're gonna, like anyone else, kind of rise to them and thrive. But I think, lots of young people aren't getting opportunities, or not visibly seeing kind of stuff that um, they can kind of get involved with. So I think that kind of, does lead to, lots of anxiety, lots of young people feeling disaffected and confused about the future and not knowing what happens next. So I'm speaking from, a position of, having the privilege of being able to offer these types of opportunities to young people.
Yeah.
So I get to see, the benefits and the positive kind of reactions that can cause. But on the flip side of it, unfortunately, I don't think that is the norm. I think where I work, we do have the ability to give out kind of opportunities to young people in many different ways. But I don't think, across the country, there's many spaces that are like that. So I think generally, in another situation where young people don't have the opportunity and don't have those clear kind of opportunities to even give back and volunteer, let alone
Yeah.
work, I think, it's no wonder that young people would feel a bit hopeless, because
Mm.
I would too.
Yeah. No, this leads on nicely to my last question, really. So do the younger generation feel like that they are socially mobile, and are able to move on from their class and economic backgrounds?
I think one of the reports that I really liked recently, I read it every year, and they always do a launch of it, and it's the youth voice census.
Hmm.
So essentially, they get a large amount of young people. It's um, it's what they call youth employability. Can't remember the organization that does it now, but they basically kind of ask a large amount of young people about their feelings about the working world. And this year they asked 8,000 young people. And kind of some of the top line stuff that I think is quite interesting. One is in line with what we just spoke about. I mean, 76%. The people asked said that they value work experience, but only 26% said that they actually did any work experience in the last year. So
Hmm.
that's a big gap in between, young people saying that they're interested in something and actually receiving it.
Yeah, yeah.
They asked young people about kind of their feelings about the future of work, and only sort of 55% said that they believe they have the skills that employers would want, and 50% said that they have the work experience that employers would want. Um, and of neat young people, so young people not in employment, education, or training, only 26% said that they feel like they know what employers want. So the reason that I kind of wanted to bring those up, because I think I think they're doing great work there, like to have tangible kind of outcomes that
Yeah.
to kind of describe what young people are feeling and the effect that lack of opportunity has on young people. Um, so I think that there is a massive sense of young people being really confused. I mean, we've got an employability clinic service here that we run every Thursday, and it's like consistently getting booked out, and we've got more young people wanting to do it than we have available slots at the moment.
Mm.
And bear in mind, this is like 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. on a Thursday evening. It's like out of school
Oh,
hours.
yeah.
So that's a testament to show that young people, if given the opportunity to get support, with things like CVs and applications and volunteering, like they'll take it.
Yeah.
And the reason, I like running that is because I think that, they don't get one-to-one support in school for
Mm.
careers often, um, because careers advisors are often they got too many cases to deal with. And then parents, I I think, lots of parents are well-meaning, but also, I understand it, but I think they're quite often they're not very objective in kind of supporting the young
Yeah.
people to do something that's practical or makes the most sense. So I think young people are drawn to us because, we're able to give that kind of somewhat impartial advice.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I was gonna say. It's quite neutral.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're here to kind of, our mandate is to kind of support the young person to work towards what they want to work towards, but also make it realistic, make it tangible. Um, so I think that given that young people do, they do respond well, and they go and do volunteering and all sorts of amazing things. But I think that, as we already said, that's not a service that's available to everyone
Yeah.
everywhere. So I think that, many young people are at complete loss, about how to get into I mean, if I'll be completely honest, even I wouldn't be able to give to a young person a really clear step-by-step guide of
Mm.
how to get even a basic retail job often now, because the things that you would typically tell a young person to do: create your CV, do some volunteering or work experience, print your CV, take it to the shopping center and hand it out. Um, they're doing that, and they're handing out hundreds of CVs and not getting any responses.
Mm.
So we've got to be quite creative about how we support the young people, because, um, you know, there doesn't seem to be as much opportunity for young people to go and work in their local cafe or go and work in, the local kind of retailer um,
Yeah.
at the moment. And even things like jobs at Tesco's that you typically think young people might
Yeah.
be. That's kind of like a good classic one to kind of for your first job to go and work at your local supermarket and things like that. Young people are applying to over and over and over again and just not getting any response. And these are young people with lots of volunteering experience, work
Mm.
experience, CVs that look really good and are really, proactive in getting a role.
Yeah.
And I do feel for them, because I think it does seem to be really, really hard to get your first role. So I definitely feel that, many young people are very confused, and, even the ones who are super proactive are,
Yeah.
losing confidence in how to take their next step.
Yeah, no, I can imagine, like, yeah, like you were saying, getting those first roles, like, yeah, my first ever job was at Mackey's when I was like 16. And those kind of jobs back then, you just take for granted, like, oh yeah, I could just get this job. But with that explanation that you just said now about how a lot of the youngsters find it very difficult, and yeah, you do see it. It's like, so yeah, it does make you think, like, what's their aspirations and the job prospects for them going forward, like. And yeah, I do feel for them. And like, for myself, I work at university and I see people on courses that are looking to better themselves by getting a degree, but they're having to work pretty much full time whilst trying to study. And it just feels like it's a constant uphill struggle, regardless of what age you're at and where you are on your career path. I'm just, yeah, Karen, sorry.
There seems like there's quite a few things coming out at the moment around like you know, even degree level graduates,
Mm.
really struggling, aren't they, to find employment in
Yeah.
their fields, in many kind of industries. And that, those are people who've kind of followed, what you're supposedly meant to do to kind of find, find a job in your industry. Um, so yeah, it's a strange situation that's happening, and that's the thing. I don't actually know, what's happening and why that's the case. Why
Mm.
level positions don't seem to be, um, why they don't, why they seem so inaccessible. So, we and it's a big win, when when a young person does finally get a role,
Yeah.
it's a huge win. But I see, you know, alongside them kind of, the countless emails that we're sending, the countless
Mm.
CVs they're handing out and all that stuff. And it's, they're doing that all on top of education as well, as you said. It's an uphill struggle a lot of the time.
Was there any kind of like last bits of advice or tips or any words of wisdom that you wanted to highlight, or anything that we've not really discussed that you wanted to shine a light on?
I think, um, the thing that I've seen, and I think I've spoken about in this, really is that I think, young people, you know, do respond to opportunity. Young people with lots of challenges respond really well to having opportunity. And, I think that that's something that I wish that we had more of in this country, I guess, was, meeting young people where they're at,
Mm.
and I'm understanding that, giving them the opportunity to try things and grow, where they're at currently, without having to, you know, perform too much or be something that they're not. Um,
Yeah.
I think I don't see why there's not a way to kind of, have that as a, part of, onboarding for looking at organizations trying to get new talent. Um, so I think for me, it's just, to remind people that, young people are, um, looking for opportunity. They're proactively looking for opportunity. And, you know, I get to work with young people all day, every day, pretty much. But I also understand that, lots of people, don't, they might not have, children in their family, so they might not really be spending much time with young people. And I think there is a lot of, as I said, bad rep and bad press in the media towards kind of, what young people are doing, getting up to,
Yeah.
and how they are. And I think, I just want to remind people to kind of be mindful um, of that, that's that happening, and maybe, go out and, volunteer and support somewhere. I also run the volunteering at, adult volunteering at the centre I work at. We've got
Yeah.
loads of amazing adults who come and support the centre because they want to support young people and they want to give their skills back and things like that. So there
Mm.
are opportunities out there to give back, and it's really positive to see that kind of, those bonds forming between
Mhm.
generations as well. So, I'd encourage people to, um, yeah, just, to give young people a chance, and to, look for opportunities to support your local school, especially if you're doing well in your career and you feel like you've got a bit of
Mm.
spare time on your hands. Like, why not go and, support your local secondary school or something like that, and reach out to them to see if, that, because I promise you they'll be really interested in having you in to kind of talk about something, or meeting young people or mentoring them.
Yeah, no, that's a great way to end the talk. I think you've highlighted some really key points in there. And Yeah, I think as hard as it is for the young people of today, I think, like you said, if people are in positions where they are quite successful and they are willing to give back and just engage with the younger people, I think it will help everyone ultimately.
Yeah, for sure.
Everyone's to benefit from that. So, no, thank you, Sam. Thanks for coming on and
Of
talking about
course.
what you do.
Yeah,
If anyone wants to get in touch with you, is there any kind of like contact details or
yeah. So I
anything?
think LinkedIn's probably easiest way. So Samuel Conley on LinkedIn. Hopefully, I'm the first one that comes up. If
Cool. I'll put it in the description and stuff.
there might be another Samuel Conley out there who has got a better LinkedIn profile than me, but
Yeah.
yeah, if I put a lot of my work on there, a lot of programs that I run and a lot of the things that happen day to day, so you can see some stuff on there. And yeah, I'm open to if people want to message and reach out. As I said, to even if it's what they want to volunteer themselves, or they're thinking, oh, actually, what Sam said about supporting somewhere sounds like something I'd want to do. And I can always, give a bit of a tips and advice about how you can approach a school or how you can volunteer and stuff like that.
Yeah. No, it's cool. And yeah, I think yeah, hopefully you'll get inundated with people asking for help for
Yeah,
that
we'll see.
side of things. Cool. So yeah, thanks again, Sam. It's great talking.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you, James.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Initial Step. If you resonate with the stories we share and have a similar background you'd like to talk about, we'd love to hear from you. Get in touch and maybe you'll be featured in an upcoming episode. And don't forget to like, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Be sure to check out our previous episodes for more inspiring stories. Until next time, I'll see you in the next one.